Hi everyone, I'm Mark Cheverton, the author of the Game Night 999 Minecraft series, and I wanted to talk with you about how I go about laying out the novel once I figure out all my key scenes. Like some of you have used these worksheets that I put together, and you have the show the villain and the internal struggle and all of these kind of things. And after you come up with all of your scenes, the dark night of the soul, the resolution, all these big conflicting scenes, I want to show you how I kind of go about laying out the novel so I can write the sequence of chapters so that I have a story. And I think of it as a journey. And so here's my little journey here. Boop. There we go. So, I go from one place to another. Typically, most novels have a journey in them. For the Lego movie, Emmett goes from his town all the way through different parts of Legoland until he finds the Craggle and he faces Lord Business and all of that. But he journeys through a lot of places and a lot of things happen to him during the journey. And the journey is pretty key. And when some of you get into middle school, you'll probably learn about the hero's journey, which is something that is done in a lot of Greek writing. I think it's Greek. I don't remember. So you'll learn about that as well. But let me show you how I do it here. So, here's my journey. And so I start off with the beginning. Introduce the main character. Sometimes I start with the villain instead. Oops. There we go. So I don't always start off with game night. Sometimes I start off with the bad guy. Maybe it's Herobrine, maybe it's Erebus, maybe it's one of those guys. It doesn't have to be the good guy. I've done many where I've started off with the bad guy, typically Herobrine. Excuse me. And so this is typically my first chapter where I introduce the main character. Maybe I introduce the villain instead, as I said. But also, I'm going to show the internal struggle. So, in the story that goes along with these writing materials, which is called It Was Watcher Faces the Wither King. And I decided I didn't like that title, so I called it Battle with the Wither King instead. Because battle is a more active word. It's always good in your titles to have an action word in it, I've learned. And faces is not a great action word, and battle is a much better action word. So in that story, I start off with showing Watcher and showing him up in the watchtower, and he feels like an outsider because no one listens to him, and he wants to be big and strong like the warriors, but he's not. He's skinny and weak. And all he can do is use his bow, and all the real warriors think that you got to use a sword and have lots of heavy armor. And so in the first chapter, I introduce Watcher to the reader, and I introduce some of that internal struggle so that the reader understands what the main character is feeling. And then the next chapter, I go, whoa, what was that? I don't know what just happened there. Let's try it again. Okay, that's better. And let's go to 12-point font. Boop. Okay. So if you oops. If you started with the hero, then show the villain. And it's important that you state the problem that the villain is causing. In my case, there we go. In my case, the villain wants the gold in the village. And so he's decided that's his gold, and he really wants it. And the easiest way to get it is to destroy everybody there and take it. So it's really important that the problem is very serious. This is called the stakes in the story. And the stakes have to be high. If Watcher doesn't figure out what's going on with Karkin, and if Karkin decides he's going to come in and take this gold and destroy the village to get it, then a lot of people are going to get hurt. So that makes the stakes really high. In a lot of my books with Herobrine wants to destroy stuff and get out of the server, and go destroy the physical world. And so those are the stakes for my Game Night 999 books, is Herobrine wants to get out and destroy stuff, and Game Night has to stop him. If the stakes were that Herobrine wants to have a waffle and all they have is pancakes, then that's not exciting. You need to have something exciting that the reader is going to be nervous about. And so that's really, really important. So you need to think about the problem that the villain is going to create. And what's the villain doing, and what does he really need, and what's going to happen. It could be that you have a story of your character, Game Night, hello, versus maybe he's trying to get across a desert to get home. And the villain is the desert. And the desert is really harsh and really mean and really bad. And so the stakes are Game Night might not survive. He might die, and people are counting on him because he has some medicine to save somebody or something. So those are the stakes. The stakes are he's got to get through the desert to protect other people, and he's worried he may not make it. So it's really important to have high stakes. That's super, super important. Okay, the next thing, oops, let me go to 12-point font because we won't fit everything. So the main character has to do something. Oops. So, we want to learn more about the main character. We want to learn a little about what the villain is doing. But it's important. We don't want to know what the villain is doing yet. We just want hints. And the main character realizes in order to stop the villain, or in case of the Watcher, in order to learn to prove that Karkin is really there, he has to go out and find Karkin. So the hero must go somewhere. And this is really, really important because, as I said, most of these stories have a journey in them. And so here the journey starts. So that's super, super important that we have a journey and that the main character is going to start on that journey, and there's a logical reason why he's going on this journey. And so that's probably my third chapter in the book. Let's move this over here so it looks prettier. There we go. So you can see how I'm kind of laying out the sequence of events along this timeline here for my story. I got the first chapter, I introduced some of the characters. I got the second chapter, I introduced the other main character, maybe some secondary characters. And then I go in here and I tell the reader that the main character's got to do something in order to figure out what's going on so he can save everybody. And so he has to start going somewhere. He has to go on a journey. In this case, Watcher goes looking for Karkin, and he wants to prove that he exists so that the warriors will believe him and nobody will make fun of him anymore. Now on this journey, oops, let's go change the font size. There we go. So your main character is going to face some challenges. That's what's good about going on a journey, is you're going to have unexpected challenges there somewhere, and you're going to have to deal with them, and there's going to be some exciting things going on. Maybe some battles, maybe he's got to solve some puzzles or something, so maybe a battle, maybe a puzzle. I had it in some of the books where Game Night sees things, and they're little hints to what the monsters are doing, and he's trying to figure it out, and he can't quite figure it out. So it's like a puzzle that the reader, along with Game Night, figures out what's going on. Oops, let me fix this here. Okay, so you got him going on a journey. He's going to bump into some mean guys, some monsters, maybe some other villagers that are mean, maybe another bully. If your story's about bullying, maybe he bumps into another bully, and another bully picks on him some. And so maybe that's what happens. I don't know. So you got to decide that. But again, introduce the character, introduce the bad guy. Maybe you do it the other way around. Explain what the stakes are in these two chapters so that we know right away, the reader knows something bad's going to happen if the good guy is not successful. And then the main character goes on some kind of journey. He's going to go take off and try to figure out what's going on. And you don't tell completely what the bad guy's doing, you just hint at it here. So here I just hint that the Wither wants to get all the gold and he wants to destroy the village, but I don't really say what the Wither's plan is and what's going to happen. And then Watcher starts going out and he goes through the forest and he goes through the jungle looking for the Wither. Okay, so let's go. So the next part here, it's important that when your guy is on your journey, that you continue to mention the big problem in the story. We need to reinforce to the reader, in my story, Battle with the Wither King, Watcher's going because he's afraid that the Karkin is going to come back, the Wither King, and he's going to come back and destroy the village. So I keep mentioning that he's afraid that it's going to happen, and nobody believes him, and he has to do something. And when you continue to mention the problem and you continue to mention the fear, what you're doing is you're adding tension. And this is the difference between a story that you read and you can't put down and a story that you fall asleep and you start to skim through. You know how sometimes you read a book and there's a paragraph and it's just a bunch of descriptive stuff, and sometimes I just skim through it because I want to see what's going to happen. And there's no tension there. And this is a really hard thing to learn how to do, and I still struggle with this in all of my writing. But you want to add tension to your story so that it can help you to continue to make this more exciting. So while he's on the journey here, while he's on this journey, I want to continue to add some tension to it. I want to keep the stakes high. I want everybody to remember that if game night or if Watcher isn't successful, something bad is going to happen. So I'm going to have, while he's on the journey, he's going to say something to somebody. Maybe he has a friend with him. Maybe he's thinking, which is hard to carry that on for a long time. In the last book I wrote, my 15th novel, which is, Herobrine's War, I gave game night a pet pig that I named Wilbur. Do any of you know what book Wilbur is from? Wilbur the pig? He's a very famous pig. Anyways, I gave game night a pet pig so that he'd have somebody to talk to. So instead of him thinking things in his head, he's talking to the pig. And of course, the pig's answer is always oink. But it gave me somebody that game night could talk to so he could talk about these big problems. And I can keep adding tension to the story by mentioning he's talking about how afraid he is about Herobrine or whatever it is. So that's super important that you keep doing that. So let's see. So what's next? So after we do that, we're going to have something that is called, let me get the font, there we go, Dark Night of the Soul. So this is where it looks like the bad guy is going to win. And the good guy almost is destroyed. Almost destroyed. So he just barely escapes. And this is really important because you want to trick the reader into thinking, "Oh wow, look at that! He's gonna die. Game night's gonna die, and we're only in like the middle of the book. Oh my goodness!" So you want to trick him into thinking that something like this is going to happen. And you remember how when you went through all of those materials on outlining your story, you had the internal struggle. Here is where the internal struggle hits. The internal struggle is what causes him to lose. So if he's afraid, the fear takes over and he's not able to get the bad guy and he just barely escapes. But now he learns a lesson. And what's really important after the Dark Night of the Soul is the good guy is really, really mad. Wait. And there we go. So the good guy is really mad. Sometimes this part is called the recommitment. I always spell this wrong. Did I get it? Let's see. Yes. So the recommitment, it means he's recommitting to his journey that he started up here. And he's recommitted to the internal struggle and defeating the bad guy. And he is not going to quit. So this happens. Oh, I spelled it wrong. I knew it. Ah, it's only one C. Okay, there we go. In the Lego movie, the recommitment is after their ship is destroyed, and the only thing that saves them is the double-decker sofa. And now all of the Lego guys are really mad at Lord Business, and they aren't going to mess around anymore. And especially Emmett realizes that he can do something. He's not a total loser. And so now Emmett is fired up about trying to defeat these guys. So that's a really, really cool part in the movie. It's really fantastic. And that's a great example of the Dark Night of the Soul. Every really good Pixar, oh, well, every Pixar movie is really good, but every one of those has a point where they're the Dark Night of the Soul happens. This is probably, I think, about Monsters Inc. This is probably when Sully and the little girl gets caught by the big crab guy. What was his name? Mr. Waternoose, I think it is. And it looks like they're going to take the girl away. And you're going, oh my God, what's going to happen? That's crazy. So after this, the pace of the book really picks up. I try to do some description in the front half of the book. I try not to do a lot of description of the terrain and the environment back here because that tends to slow down things and it tends to reduce the tension, and we want to add tension. So here, after the Dark Night of the Soul, the good guy is going to start setting up for the battle. So now he has an idea on how he's going to defeat the guy. And he's going to figure out how to do it, but you don't tell how he's going to defeat it. You give hints on how the good guy, will defeat the bad guy. That's really important. There was a quote by, I'm terrible with names. I'm trying to think of who it was. Yeah, I don't remember who the quote was. But the quote was, I'm going to type it down here because it's such a great quote. I don't like what writers say. I like what they whisper. That's such a great quote. So this means that the person that said this, and I'm sorry I don't remember who it is. I wish it was me. It's not. It's really clever. But he likes what writers write, but what's really important is what they hint at, what they whisper. The whispering, the hinting at what's going to happen so that the reader has to figure it out. That's really important. And so that's a really cool quote. I really like that. So here, we're going to set up the battle and we're going to give hints about how the good guy is going to defeat him. But we want the final battle to be a surprise, right? You don't want to know going in what's going to happen. Right? When you had the Lego movie, no way did anybody expect that Emmett is going to face Lord Business and he's just going to say, you're a special. I had no idea watching that movie how Emmett was going to get away from Lord Business at the end there. And that was really surprising that he turned it around like that. And that's what made it really fantastic. So here also, when you're setting up for the battle, you want to hear the good guys. Let me do that again. The good guy's fears or insecurities or something. We don't want it to be guaranteed that he's going to win. He knows that he might lose, and a lot of people are relying on him. So here we're hinting that to the reader, you don't really know how it's going to come out. So we want to have hints that it might be successful, but hints that the guy is still afraid, and the inner conflict must be part of this final battle. That's the whole point of the story, is for the character to learn how to overcome his inner conflict. And so you need to set this up so that the inner conflict is going to have an important role. So in my story with the battle with the Wither King, I know from experience that when you attack a wither, they float up in the air. And if they float up in the air, you can't hit them with a sword. And so that's why the archer is going to be so important. Move that up a little bit, because the archer is the only one that's going to be able to hit him. So I chose archer on purpose because I knew that was going to be part of the inner conflict, that Watcher didn't think he was really a good warrior, when it turns out he is. He just uses a different kind of weapon. So you want to have in the final, setting up the battle. You're hinting at that inner conflict. That must be part of it as well. So in mine, when he's setting up, he's probably thinking, Watcher's probably thinking about what's going to happen if I can't defeat him. What happens if my arrows aren't strong enough? You want to hint at things like that so that you know there's some uncertainty. Okay. And then the last part. What I see from a lot of kids that send me stories is they like writing the final battle. And who doesn't like writing the final battle? A lot of times when I write a book, that's the first thing I write is the final battle because I already got that in my head. All right, so this is the big showdown. Oops, bigger. Here. There we go. So this is the big showdown, and this is where it's going to be good versus evil. It could be man versus desert. It could be, in this case, Watcher versus the Wither King. It could be a lot of different things competing with each other. But this is where there's going to be the big battle with the good versus evil. And what I like to do is I put the main character in a situation where it looks like he's going to lose. So I will do this. I learned this from one of the books on writing that I read. I read a lot of books on writing. But one of the books said, always, let me write this down, always end on a plot question. That means, it doesn't mean end on a question necessarily. What it means is end a chapter. Oops, always end a chapter. That when you end a chapter, you want to end it where the reader's thinking, well, what happens next? I want to know what happens next. And it kind of drives the reader into reading the next chapter, which is really important. So here at the end, I'll have this battle at the end. And if you read my first book, Invasion of the Overworld, there was a battle there, and they're battling, and it looks like they're going to lose, and then Crafter goes out, and he does something. I won't say what in case you didn't read it. But you're like, oh my God, look what happened. He's destroyed. What are they going to do now? Oh no. And it looks like they're done. And that was the end of the chapter. And so you read to that point, and you go, there's no way I'm waiting until tomorrow night to read the next chapter, and you dive into the next chapter right away. And that's the goal of the writer, is you want to drive the reader through your book by adding lots of tension. Here's the tension up here. You want to add a lot of tension in the story so they're really nervous and they're not sure what's going to happen. And so here, when I do this final battle, I make it look like he's going to lose. And I make it look like there's no way he can survive and be victorious. And then, oh, that's the end of the chapter. And so you're left hanging there. Cliffhanger is what they call it a lot. And then we have the resolution, right? That you described in your writing outline. So in the resolution, the good guy, the protagonist, he's going to learn something. And he solves his internal struggle. Oops, I'm going to run out of room. Boop, there we go. So, in my case, with Watcher, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but Watcher sees one of the warriors, and he sees that they're wounded, and he sees that they're scared, and it looks like they're going to be destroyed by the Wither King. And it looks really, really bad, but Watcher looks up to that guy, and he thinks, well, look, that guy's scared just like me. Maybe that brave warrior and me, we aren't so different after all. Maybe we're really the same. And if he can be brave, then I can be brave. And so this solving of the internal struggle, this causes the main character, he gets really serious. And he wins the battle. So here, Watcher gets really angry, and he gets really serious, and he starts wailing on the Wither King with his bow and arrow, and all of his friends that you learn about, the Insigs, which then become Signifs. It probably makes no sense at all, so you got to read the story, The Battle of the Wither King. I actually think it came out really good. So here we're going to have this resolution where we're going to show that he learned something and that the main character gets really serious, and somehow something solved keeps him from losing down here in the final battle. Maybe the last second, his fear is overcome and he ducks and he realizes, hey, I don't have to be afraid, and then he starts fighting again and getting really serious. So here we're going to have the resolution. It has to tie to the internal conflict because that's the whole point of the whole book. And then after the battle is won, oops, so let's add that here. So, oops, how do I get back in there? There we go. So, oops, battle is won. Hooray! Here, celebratory smiley face. There we go. Oops, okay. So now after that's all done, we need to go, what's that? Go away. Okay. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, you can't see that up there. So the last scene, maybe the last couple of scenes, this is part of the resolution. Maybe this is resolution part 2. We want to hear what the good guy learned. We want to hear him say it. We want to hear him say, wow, I just realized that I'm brave after all and I'm a good warrior. Or he makes friends with the bully and you can see that they're friends now and they smile and laugh together because now they understand each other or something. So you want to hear what's been learned. This is the end of the story, and let me move this little guy here. There we go. And life, goes back to normal. So that's the end of the story. And so if you look at it, we got maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 chapters. If you look at Battle for the Wither King, you know how many chapters there are? There's about 10 chapters in there. So when I write a short story, this is kind of the layout I use. When I write a novel, I typically, when the journey starts, instead of having one destination, I typically have 3 destinations. And then, because of that, my novel ends up being 3 times as long. It ends up being about 30 chapters instead of 10 chapters. And for me, a chapter is typically 6 to 8 pages long. Sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter, but that's about it. It's about 10 pages long or so. So this is kind of the way I do the layout. There's important stuff here for you to think about. When you try to do this, you're going to find this is hard. And it is hard. That's why there's not a lot of people that are writers, because being a writer is hard. And the way you learn to do this is you do it. And you do it and you struggle and you'll fail.